when people ask me around here, hey, they're thinking of giving me a beginning band, like my friend, he just got a new job at a high school, but he also has a middle school, and they're open to doing whatever. And I said, hey, what you'd love to do is separate the beginners, woodwind, brass, percussion. Do that. You'll actually get through so much more quickly, because you're not going to be freaking out about worrying about what are the woodwinds thinking when I'm working with the brass on the same note for 2 weeks.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. I'm excited to announce that Everything Band has joined forces with several other music education-related podcasts to form the Music Teacher Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to the episode, and this week's guest, band director Matthew Provino. Hi, Matthew.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Thanks for joining me. And so I'm just going to tell my listeners a little bit about how I found you. I'm using your method book that you wrote.
I'm sorry.
So, Matthew, can you introduce yourself for the listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a middle school band director in Southern California in La Puente at Sierra Vista Middle School in the Hacienda La Puente Unified School District. I have a 7-8 school, as well as I teach at two elementaries that feed into me. I have 3 beginning bands and 1 advanced band, as well as a before-school percussion class.
And so can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you got into music, like your origin story when you started playing?
Oh, sure. I'm a product of the Anaheim Union HS District, and they're strictly junior high school, and so the elementary districts are separate. And at where I was at Miller Elementary, we had a band program, but it wasn't a really fleshed out program. So my first chance to be in band was in middle school, and I started in clarinet at Walker Junior High, and that was my 7th grade year. And the only reason I chose it was because the band got to perform at Disneyland, and it seemed so hokey at the time, but that was the hook. That was what got me into playing clarinet. And this is not even the time when Disneyland cost a lot to get in. I mean, it was $22 to get into Disneyland, and for me, missing school to go perform at Disneyland was a big honor. So it was what drove me to learn the clarinet. And then 2 years later, I was in Kennedy High School with Bob Anthony, and it was his 2nd year at that school. And the reason I decided to do marching band there was a simple reason that he said that if we did marching band, we didn't have to take PE. And again, I didn't really think about it, but you probably work harder in marching band physically than you do in PE. But it was what got me into the band program over there. And right away, within the first band camp, I switched to tuba. So my main instrument's actually tuba, and I've been playing tuba for quite a while. Around my junior year, senior year, that's when I really started to find myself exploring different avenues of music and not just staying in my own band program, which was phenomenal. We were playing music like Festive Overture, Lincolnshire Posy, Of Sailors and Whales, Blessed Are They, Elsa's Procession, Shepherd's Hay. These were great pieces, and it was fun to play. But then I got a chance to join the Pacific Symphony Youth Orchestra, and all of a sudden, all the orchestra music that you heard as in cartoons and movies, I was playing, and that excited me. And then I was able to go to see the Pacific Symphony perform, which later on I ended up working for the Pacific Symphony and running the youth orchestra as a manager. That really just helped me start moving towards the fact that I really didn't want to be a desk job person. I really enjoyed playing music. And so I started pursuing it. And my senior year in high school, I was invited to play in the B band over at Cal State Fullerton. And so as a senior, I would go half a day at school at Kennedy, and then I would go over to Cal State Fullerton and play in their B band. And I was doing their summer music camp that they had at the time, CMA, with 200 other students. It was a fun time. It still is a fun time. And that's how I ended up going right to Cal State Fullerton and majoring in music education.
So what was that like at Cal State Fullerton? What sort of program was that like?
At the time, it was really more of a band program. They had band, a phenomenal choir program. Orchestra was kind of on the back burner at the time. They had an orchestra program that was kind of run jointly with Pacific Symphony, and it was their version of the YMF program and AYS program that you see in LA, the semi-pro collegiate students, and it was called the Pacific Symphony Institute. That didn't last too long. That was cut by the time I believe 2000 came around, and then they finally hired a new orchestra director for that. But it was mainly band and choir, because you had John Alexander on the choir side and Mitch Fennell, Dr. Mitch Fennell, as the band director there. And it was just a nice family. Everyone knew each other. Everyone pushed each other to excel, and at all levels. You didn't really have a separation of the professional performance majors versus the education majors. There was a really good mix of the groups, and they all really pushed each other to exceed.
So do you have, I know you mentioned that those wonderful pieces that you were playing in high school, is there a director or a teacher whose lessons from either junior high or high school that you still use today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think using the emotion and the power of the music, of being able to perform with a giant group over at Kennedy High School, to just feel something grander than what you were originally thinking going into it, is what kind of pulled me in. And so a lot of times when I'm selecting music for my junior high bands, I overprogram. I'm very at fault for doing that, but I don't want to give them just any piece. I want to make sure that they're getting stuff that, well, moves them, that they can really dig into trying to feel the music.
The reason why I mentioned it just briefly in the intro, the reason why I called you, and this is, my thing is I'm starting a new job as a, beginning band for the first time, and I was looking around for method books, and I was kind of dissatisfied. And then I saw that you're offering one that you just have for free available for anyone who wants to download it. And I think that's an exceptional thing.
Well, yeah, and as a famous director out here, Leonard Narumi, says, it's the Nihon gene. I'm half Japanese, and it's not enough for me to just work with my kids. If I have a chance to really affect everyone else that needs help, I'm going to give it. I just want to be unselfish in that sense, and I don't believe that anyone should be held back just because of funding or lack of access to anything. And the internet's been great for really helping level a lot of playing fields to music education.
So let's talk about it a little bit, and let's kind of dig in. I want to know what the genesis was of it and how you sort of began the project, and then how you saw it to completion, because as we know, starting something is easy, finishing something is much more difficult. Oh,
yeah. The genesis started really simply. It was me and my buddy Phil Herrera, and Phil Herrera is a good friend of mine, and he was at the time, he's the high school director that I fed into, and we're both tuba players, so we're kind of the same mindset on a lot of things. And then he ended up going to the neighboring district and doing middle school band as well as elementary. And over the course of the conversation, we just said how much we did not think that the current method books that were available really worked for elementary. And here's the thing about nowadays with computers and the internet, you can figure out how to do things. And it's really a DIY type of environment. And so I said, I can do this better. Let's do a couple things. Number one, let's make sure the note sizes are bigger, because some people don't get to have a band room to teach in. You might not have enough stands. So if the notes are too small, kids that are sharing stands are going to have a harder time seeing it. So let's really just make the size of the font and the note heads really big. And then because of that, the happy coincidence is that we can turn every line into a 4-bar phrase. So it's easier to do that. We were also looking at different method books and what notes they start. Now, us being tuba players, we're going to be brass centric. And I think when it comes to method books, if you listen to the After Sectionals podcast, they're right on when they say your method book is not your curriculum. It should be reversed. So you decide how you want to skin the cat and go from there. Me and Phil, we looked at how we think the brass players are getting a little bit shortchanged starting on D. So we want to start on F, because if you start on F and go down to D, well, on every brass instrument, except for horn for the most part, if you start on F, E flat and D are still F. You're still blowing F, and you're letting the valves do the work. Whereas, yes, it's probably the worst spot to start for flute, because they're going to start on F and then have to switch the weirdest fingerings to E flat. But our reckoning of it was they're going to have to do that anyways. If we start with that, now they have way more chance. Now, for the elementary, could that be a hurdle? Should we be starting with the BAG notes? Sure, maybe. But for us, we wanted to make sure that this was kind of uniform for the brass players, because that's always going to be the weakest group to really start off, because just being able to hold a note is going to be a little bit harder to do. That's how it kind of started. It was just supposed to be an elementary book. So if you look at part one, it's kind of short. And we wanted to make sure that there was a piece at the end. And there was a 4-part piece. We took Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and we called it 4-part Little Star. And what we wanted to do was, within the range of 6 notes, give you a little bit of a chorale format. And the beauty of it is that we're not writing a tuba part for only tuba. Well, you get the tuba line. The D line is the tuba line, and then the B and C line are the harmonic lines, and then the melody is obviously the A line. So you can play around with balance. You can switch it around. You can give it to a chamber ensemble. You can just have the flutes play it. You can do a lot of things and start working with listening and balance at will, at your discretion. And really, one of the other things we wanted to make sure that we did in the book was to leave very little writing, very little text, very little articulation markings. We wanted to be able to just go back through the book at any time and say, now let's play this staccato after we've taught it. Let's play this with accents this way. Let's play it now cut time. And that's one of the main reasons we kind of sat there and limited the amount of text that's actually in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a terrific idea. And I was noticing that when I chose the book, what I liked about it, it was very much a blank slate, that the teaching had to come from me, and that it was at my, as you mentioned, at my discretion.
Yeah. And that's going to be, if you are completely new to instrumental music, my method book is probably going to be the worst thing for you. Outside of the fact that we did put the fingerings on every page, because at the elementary level, if you're only seeing them once or twice a week, man, they can forget the first note you taught them a week later. So we just put it there. And what the happy coincidence was, the more we did that, and now that we've expanded to the second book and it's always there, we found that the kids don't need it as much. And they're not having to refer to it as much. So it's just the way we've done it. And overall, it's funny because the first book was done, I think we did it really, I did it really quickly, putting all the formats together and having Phil do a lot of the composing as far as the harmonic arrangements. And that took, I think it was about 3 months. I think we started in January and we wanted to get it done pretty quick. So I think by March, we had the initial 5 books, which was flute, clarinet, alto saxophone, trumpet, and trombone. And I just threw it up on the band director's page and said, hey, can everyone find mistakes on this? Because my eyes were going crossed after a while trying to format everything. And it was great. They were really good about finding a lot of mistakes. And I just found another one today, which was bugging me. But they were great about it. And then the response was, this is great. Can we just use it for all of our beginning bands? So could you put in the tenor sax and the horn and the mallets and oboe? And so over the course of the last 2 years, we've done that, as well as done a part 2, because it was not meant to be for the middle school band, but we're finding out it worked really great for the middle school beginning band as well. And it was just too short. So we decided, okay, what other sections do we want to attack? Well, obviously key signatures, time signatures, and a couple other things like syncopations. So we ended up, again, in January of last year, writing out what we wanted to see in it. And one of the big responses we heard was how many people loved the 4-part songs. So we said, okay, let's do a lot more of those as well. So you find those in the book as well. But all in all, the second book, man, I think we've done about 1,000 hours of work.
Oh, I have no doubt. The second book, for those who haven't seen it yet, the first book's, about 30 pages?
Yeah.
And the second book's, 75?
75. It's gigantic. And I think the beauty of what I have is I don't have anything limiting me. I don't have a publisher saying, hey, we can't afford to publish it at 75 pages. So we just did.
Well, I got to tell you, I printed it out, the conductor's book, and I put it in sheet protectors, and my goodness. It's a full 3-inch binder. I probably have to move up to a 4-inch binder.
Oh, yeah. And it's probably not even good to have sheet protectors because you're tripling the size of the weight.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm hoping that I have it for a few years.
So, yeah, that's kind of the genesis of the book. And I'm running through the second book with my Vance band, which is kind of cool. It becomes pretty much a good rehash. And I think we did a good job of transitioning B flat to E flat and not really going for the range. I think we decide, well, most pieces won't play up in that range. They just play in the key signature. So we ended up doing a couple things where we had the B flat rhythm as a pentascale and then doing rhythms with it, because you can have just rhythms by itself, and we'd have that in the first book. The second book has that as well, but then we wanted to do fingers with it. But we wanted to make it easy so that way you weren't sitting there trying to teach new notes, and it was very familiar. So we just went with a B flat 5-finger pattern and kept it at that. But then on this next page is the E flat version of the same thing. And so we did that a couple times throughout the book. The beginning has the pentarhythms, and then in the middle there's a short studies where they were just random short studies that Phil had written. And I said, hey, this would be nice if we just doubled it up, had one in B flat, and then you can see the same one in E flat, and you can see the difference, and the kids can hear and see the difference between the two, where it'll sound the same. It's just different notes.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to teach that difference.
Yeah. And then the back end of the book is kind of the last parts of my warm-up book, because one of the things I thought when I was going into teaching was, well, if I did it in college, it should be good for the kids. No, not really. And so what we did was we ended up just taking small things. One of my things is that I don't like to just teach the scale. I want to teach variation. So we have the pentascale. On the next page is the full scale. The next page is the elevator, where you just keep repeating tonic in between each note. And then the 5-finger pattern mountain range velocity exercise. And then after that, there's a B-flat scale in thirds, which was a favor asked by another band director in Southern California, Jim Johnson. He wanted stuff for his high school. And so I was like, well, I have it. I'm just going to include it as another variation. And then you have the harmonic scales.
Well, certainly, even the last couple pages by themselves can be printed out for a high school band.
And that was kind of the idea. It was, well, you don't have to use all the book. You can pick and choose, but here's some stuff at the end where you don't see all of that written out all the time. You can use the Foundations of Methods book, but it doesn't have every scale in different variations. You can do the Fussell book, but that can look pretty dry to a kid, especially in middle school.
Right. Plus, it's either an expense for them or more expense for your program if you don't have a big budget. You know, exactly. I would hate to spend money on method books. I have a very tiny budget at my new job, and I'd hate to spend method books when I need to buy literature.
Yes, absolutely. And nowadays, with the band directors group, the middle school band directors group, the beginning band engagement chat room, there are people that are putting stuff out like Justin Dickson, who's got an amazing, he put out a free tuner for your phone that all my kids download. Instead of going and buying a tuner, now they have a tuner free for them to use. You have John McAllister, who is another composer who put out a bunch of long tone exercises that he also put arrangements on YouTube. And there's other people out there constantly putting stuff out, and you can get away with almost not buying a lot of music nowadays. And as far as your methods and anything supplemental, you can find it online. And whether it's on my school website, where I just put up a whole bunch of quizzes that was done off of the Mad Minute website, and it's done in the style of my warm-up books or my method books. You can just do your own. And I think I even put out shortcuts of how to get certain instruments in their ranges.
I'm looking at the end of book 2 now on Adobe Acrobat as we're talking. What keys do the scales? Oh, you have all the scales. Oh my goodness, you have every key.
Yeah, wow. I just put them all there. What's interesting is, for me, I don't go through the sharps because one of my rules, and Phil's kind of the same ilk, is if we're not going to be playing music in that key, we're not going to worry about touching it right at that moment. We're going to wait until they're going to be immersed in that key, which was funny because he used to say, oh, yeah, well, they need to be in all 12 keys. And I'd say, Phil, when he was the high school director, so when are you going to play in B major? When are you going to play in E major? When are you going to play in D major? You're in marching band when they first start. So they won't see that until maybe spring. So he decided he'd arrange the music and put it in 12 keys.
Yeah, it's great. Can I make just the former theory teacher in me? Can I make one suggestion?
Sure.
Can you add melodic minor?
Yeah, I definitely could. That was one of the thoughts we had, was to put in all three minors, the harmonic, natural, and melodic. No, but that's definitely one of those things that, as we've gone through, and now I'm kind of finished all the books that I wanted to finish. There's only one book left, which is a big hole, which is percussion, because I couldn't figure out how I wanted to put percussion in the book. I didn't want them just tapping quarter notes, because you can sit there on the first exercise of just whole notes with the band and spend so much time on just producing the tone, whereas the percussionists, man, they can't do whole notes. You're not going to teach them rolls right off the bat. They're just going to do 1 and 3 or 2 and 4. And I think you lose them really quick. So it's been one of those things that I'm going to be hitting up a lot of my friends who are percussion people that teach middle school and say, okay, how would I attack this? Would I write it up more like a drum set with a whole bunch of different instruments, but not actually say it's drum set? So then that way there's a lot more options for the kids to rotate around and learn more parts every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, have you gotten into much of the planning stage, or are you still kind of soliciting ideas?
It's soliciting ideas, because a lot of times what I keep coming back to is that the best option is not to have percussion with your beginning band, is to have them separate. It's as different of an animal than it is strings to band. You wouldn't want to start strings at the same time with the band kids in the same class. It's going to be harder to do because they're two different styles, and what you have to focus on are completely opposites.
Yeah, and then you get the counter argument that you have to start percussionists somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And so you see the argument online as well. Well, do we start them right away, or can you wait a semester so they can understand what it takes to be a band student, so they have more patience for everyone else?
Yeah, I sort of wrestled with that, because in this new job, I basically had carte blanche to do what I wanted. And one of the first things I changed is I cut down the instrument choices to flute, clarinet, trumpet, trombone. And I toyed with the idea of eliminating percussion, but I left it in. So I have no saxophones in my band.
Okay.
And, my thought was that, first of all, I haven't taught for 15 years. So a lot of the stuff I'm desperately trying to remember my clarinet fingerings, like teaching myself all summer. And, it's slow. And so I wanted to try to cut down some of my, what I had to get through. And I also figured that, every fourth grader is required to take band at my school. And so I should use that. There's a few kids who really want to play saxophone. That's a carrot.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a good way, since you're in that environment where everyone has to be. You can use things as carrots and not miss it.
Right, exactly. Plus, I have plenty with the instruments that I have now to get a good sound. And plus, we're only meeting 2 days a week, so we're talking 6-note pieces at the end. Yeah,
and, I kind of related to poker because one of my hobbies is poker. If you're at a table with 10 players, well, that's increasing the difficulty of what you're doing. Well, the more at the beginning level, if you can take away instruments, well, that allows you to streamline and make the difficulty a little bit easier for teaching, especially in your situation. Because if you can then bring it on later, well, then it becomes the factors become a lot less significant.
Yeah, and I'm also finding that in this particular position is that, the fourth graders, because the band students only meet twice a week, is that my fourth graders this year are all starting new. The fifth graders who were with a different teacher last year have come to me, and they basically are starting new again.
Yeah.
And so many of them, and 3 or 4 of them have decided that they wanted to play different instruments anyway. So I'm sort of starting back at the beginning with the fifth graders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was going to ask, so using your method book, how would you recommend handling that? Would I start them with the beginning book?
I think so. I think I would probably use the beginning book because they're already going to be familiar with it. That's kind of the beauty of it. You'll hear a lot of directors, well, what happens with intermediate band? Well, you can take another method book and go through and review it. It's kind of the similar stuff, but a different look. With a lot of kids that switch for me, when I have someone switching from trumpet to tuba, I'll give them the book and say, here, take this over the summer, figure it out. And usually it's not hard because they've already gone through the book. They know how the fingerings work. They know how the rhythms work. That's not new. For them, it's just getting the sound and the fingerings. And that comes a lot quicker, especially at younger ages, than it does the older they get.
Mm-hmm. And when would you switch kids to book 2?
It depends. For you, I would say if they're comfortably getting through all of book 1 in the first year, then you can start to progress through book 2. If you are an everyday school, book 2 becomes the second half of the semester. So it depends on how much you're able to get through and what you're looking to get through and teach to the students, as well as you're still having to do real music, to do full-on orchestrated music for the bands.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, this is really fascinating because I'm kind of living it, but my listeners might be going, okay, enough about this. So I kind of want to know on a bigger picture and what's been the response to the method books from the community?
It's been absolutely phenomenal. Just over the last week, I've been getting texts from a whole bunch of people from all over the world, from China, from Canada. A couple years ago, someone was texting me from Myanmar. To just think that someone seen the book and is using it out there is phenomenal. And it's been all positive. And anyone that finds mistakes, they're like, hey, there's a mistake. And I try and correct it usually within a week and just upload it right up onto the website or my Google Drive and try and help everyone out as much as possible.
Yeah, it's really impressive. It's an impressive piece of work. And so everyone who's listening, if you haven't checked it out, at least go take a look at it. And I'll go ahead and link it in the show notes if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, it's just such a great thing that you're doing, and I'm really happy to talk to you about it. It seems like, a really special thing. And the one thing I thought about when I first saw it is I noticed that you have a connection. Did you do the ABC Master's program?
Yeah, you could see it kind of running through the book itself, how very intricately detailed it is. It's very clean. The graphics are very composed, and you'll even see certain people's artwork throughout the whole thing that are linked to ABC. One of them being Steve Graves.
Well, I had Max McKee on the show.
Yes. Oh, yeah, he is so great.
Yeah. So can you tell me about your experience with the American Band College?
Oh, wow. I started back when the American Band College was actually still located or in residence with Southern Oregon University, and that was 2008. I took a hiatus for 1 year, came back 2010, and finished in 2011. By 2000, I believe 10 or 11, they had gone over to Sam Houston State, which was seemingly flawless. You didn't really notice a transition, and everything was just a top-notch program as far as organization. Even things when it's chaotic, things are very well organized, and they keep that in mind. It's one of those really interesting situations. If it's kind of like a conference, but more,
right? Because
you have time to interact with everyone. Whereas a conference, you're shuttling from session to session. You're secluded in parts unknown, Ashland, Oregon. And it is by far, as Dr. Tim Lautenheiser says, the hardest place to get to on earth. You're secluded there for 2 weeks. So you get to know 200 other band directors, and you can pick their brains. And they're at all different levels and different situations and different areas. And you get to get a bigger scope of what you can do. And I've made so many friends from Hawaii to Canada, Washington, Portland, all over Iowa. And it's fun to hear what they're doing and try and relate and go, okay, if they can do this, this is where I should be going too. And it gives you a little bit more of a worldview, because I'll admit it, coming out of Cal State Fullerton, you have the Cal State Fullerton view. You barely have the view of Cal State Long Beach, which is only 30 minutes away, let alone UCLA or USC's viewpoint of how music should be done or education values of what you should be teaching. Whereas you're up in ABC, you get the world scope of everything. And then on top of that, the clinicians are phenomenal. And not only do they have the clinics, which are great, but you have chances to talk to them at lunch, sit next to them. One of my favorite stories is when Matt Conaway, who's I believe is over at Purdue now, but he's now a composer for Barnhouse. That happened at ABC. We had Robert W. Smith there, and at lunch, Matt Conaway says, "Oh, you think you can take a look at some stuff? I just want to get notes." The next day, he brings it, and W. Smith's looking at it and going, "This is phenomenal. We need to sign you." And that's literally how it started from there. By 2 years later or a year later, I was actually writing on one of my projects about his piece that got published by Barnhouse. And it's a phenomenal family. Is it going to be the most, if you're looking for what your undergrad was, you're not going to find it there. It is a very singular type of environment that is there to really produce greatness for everyone, to try and push everyone to do well. And it's such a great, the word that I always come back to is family. It's a great family.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with or meeting Matt Conaway and meeting Robert W. Smith. And so what is your experience? Have you had any composers into your band room?
Very little. I would use one of the composers who's now passed away from Cal State Fullerton and have him arrange smaller things, because I didn't have a budget to really explore doing full-on arrangements or compositions. So I would have Dr. Garibrandt from Cal State Fullerton arrange stuff for us. And it was really fun in that sense that I could work with him, and he wasn't really used to working with middle school kids. So for him, it was, well, can we do 3 trombone parts? No, we can't do 3 trombone parts. No, there is no bass trombone yet. How far can the tuba play? A B flat scale. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny story. When I first, I've sort of said this on the show before, but when I first came back to writing band music, I had been writing orchestral music and chamber music, in my doctorate of composition. And so it was, much different music. And I decided that I want to write the music that I loved, which was band music. And so I tried to write a grade 2 piece, and it ended up being like 10 minutes and like syncopated. And I sent it to a band director friend of mine who I went to college with, and he sent it back. He's like, "Okay, let's talk about this." And so he kind of went through the whole thing, and it's been an education in like what kids can actually play. And it's so different in different areas. I mean, I'm sure you can take the bands of Texas, which, even in California, we hold to high regard. You take those top groups that are competing in UIL and winning UIL, and they can play college music probably. Oh, yeah. That's what we're doing. There's very few groups that can do that at the middle school level here in Southern California.
And so let's talk a little bit about California, and you can demur and not say names, certainly. But sure. I was a band director in California. I was up in the Monterey Salinas area.
Oh, okay.
And so I was teaching in the Central Coast section of the CMEA. And so one of the things that I was a young band director, and I wasn't really kind of plugged into the community. I was on the board of directors but I didn't go to the state conference, and I didn't go to sort of the sort of professional development conferences. I didn't even know about Midwest at that time. And so what's it like for a young director in Southern California? What's the community like to kind of push towards those professional development opportunities?
It's really interesting because California is so big, and if you spend time in California, there's 2 Californias. There's Northern and then Southern California. And in fact, even though there are attempts to unify across the entire state, you have CMEA, which is interesting because most of Northern California will say CMEA. If you're in Southern California, we are talking SCSBOA, the Southern California Band and Orchestra Association. And they have their own conference that is kind of the big thing that's happening. In fact, they're now a part of the NAMM show that happens in January at the Anaheim Convention Center. And that is a spectacular event in itself, because you have every music merchant that you can think of, and they all have booths, and you get to go around, try out all the instruments, talk to reps, and see what's new coming out, from Sibelius and Finale to the newest tubas, or the plastic tubas, if you will, too. So for down here, we have basically SCSBOA is trying to expand their conference, and I think they've done a good job. I'm not going to hype it just because I'm going to be presenting this January with Phil on tuba, but we will be doing a beginning tuba thing this January at the conference. And again, if you're from out of state and you're looking for something really cool, the SCSBOA conference this January is a great experience, because not only is it a 2-day conference, you're right next to Disneyland. I'm going to quickly say that it's right next to Disneyland. But you also get a badge for the NAMM show if you can register early enough. And I believe the deadline is sometime in October. But if you go on the website for SCSBOA, they will get a hold of you if you are from out of state.
Yeah, and see, this is exactly what we were talking about. As you talk about this conference, I never heard of this, and I was teaching in California.
Yeah. And so they're going to try, that's kind of the idea now, is to sit there and be something as big as possible, try and be the biggest one west of Texas, because every state has them, but we have the biggest population, so we should be able to affect every single side of music, from marching band to concert band to pedagogy to jazz to alternate ensembles. And so that's what it's become. It's a 2-day conference now, just 2 blocks south of Disneyland.
Yeah, no, California is an enormous state.
Yeah, absolutely. Driving to get to Ashland, Oregon from Fullerton, it's an 11-hour drive nonstop. What
sort of lessons as a teacher would you want to share with the listeners?
I think the biggest one is to understand that somewhere, someone is gone through the same problems you're encountering now. And now with the internet, now with the Facebook groups, even everyone being able to go to conferences like TMEA, Midwest, SCSBOA, you'll be able to find people and find solutions to the problems you're having. It doesn't have to be cut and run. There are people that have figured out ways of getting around harder situations, and you don't have to try and do it alone. Just reach out. People will help out, and it's a good community. Band directors are, by trade, just a great community to be a part of.
I agree with that. I tell you, it's been so wonderful for my career. You know, I like I said, I was writing music as a doctoral student. I stopped writing. I was just kind of fed up with it, and it took writing band music again to kind of bring me back as a composer. And so I owe this community a lot. I'm happy to be back a part of it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, the more we have, the better.
Can you tell me about this picture on page, 13 or whatever that is of your beginner book?
Which book
That's
are we
the
looking
one
at?
About the beginner. That's the thing that came out of a brass instrument.
Oh.
What in the heck is that?
That was a piece of corn. And it's amazing when you flush out an instrument that you can find some really disgusting stuff. So that was a picture. And so, yeah.
I thought it was a spider.
No, yeah, it was actually a piece of corn that grew.
Oh, that is disgusting.
It was funny because it was an elementary, and I really didn't expect it to go really far. So I had a lot of white space because the next page would have, 4 notes, whereas the previous page only had 3 notes. And so I was like, okay, I had dead space. Let's put something in there, And so that's what you see in the first book. You even have after number 41, Peace Like a River, there's a picture by Steve Graves that he had put on Facebook. And I said, hey, I'm going to throw that in my book. He said, sure. And for people that haven't seen it, it's basically a Jenga setup with blocks missing at the bottom and blocks missing other places. And he's got two arrows saying, well, this is missing info and this is unanswered questions. And what's going to happen is the Jenga is going to fall over. And next to it, I just put, you can't build a band with missing pieces. It will fall over.
Yeah. Can you explain it a little bit for the listeners?
Oh, the different things. Yeah. And so what we ended up doing was just having some fun stuff in the first one, as far as all the different little images. The second one, there wasn't as much because it was just full of stuff. But like the back page was something that I ended up creating for my students. So that was just a holdover from something I had already made a few years ago before the book, listing different professional musicians on their instrument. Because again, we always struggle to try and get the kids to listen to musicians. And nowadays with YouTube is way different than when we were growing up with records. And so give them the names, and then YouTube's beautiful because of the suggestions that they're going to give. They can just start going down the rabbit hole. And so on the first book, you have all these famous instrumentalists on the back page. On the second book, I put classical pieces, 100 pieces that I think they should all listen to. So if they want, or if they're curious, they can sit there and play it. If they are really uppity about it, you can start assigning it for homework. But it's just done almost, I don't want to say tongue in cheek, but in a way that is almost nonchalant. Whereas the other thing I end up doing in my own program to make sure that they are listening, instead of saying go home and listen, is I have something I start the day off with. So after the kids are warming up and I'm ready to start, I silence the band and we do something called 140 minutes. And it's a little takeoff of the old MTV 120 minutes late night show where they would do alternative music. I wanted to do one where we played something one a day that's only a minute for the students, because I'm not going to sit there at a beginning level and bore them with an hour-long Mahler symphony. But I took about 140 pieces, found clips of them that were in my CD library and clipped them down to a minute, and then just put it on a playlist on my iPod. And every day we go through and listen to something, and I'll give a couple notes. Today was the 1812 Overture, and so I got to introduce Russian music and the canons that are in the 1812.
I'd like to take a short break from our episode to invite you to listen to my music at markjconner.com. I am always seeking opportunities for collaboration. If you are interested in commissioning a new piece of music for me, having me work with your students in person or via Skype, or to just say hello, please drop me a line at markjconner@gmail.com or through the contact form on my website. Where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
You know, I listened to a lot of the podcasts earlier, and a lot of them were taking it in the idea of competition as far as getting first place, getting the rating. I want to look at it in a different way. Obviously, if you're going for first place medals and that's the end all be all, that's going to be unhealthy. It's a drive that's not conducive to great music making. But at the same time, for us down here in Southern California, when we do festivals, it's just a rating. It's just superior, excellent, fair, good, poor. For the vast majority of people, you're going to get usually an excellent, and few will get the superior. It's a good way of pushing yourself to always get more and better. But it doesn't need to become toxic either. And one other way I was looking at competition was looking at what you have as your band program, figuring out what your level is going to be, because everyone's got different situations. But at the same time, you can find bands that are in similar situations. Are you doing the same as they are? Are you able to do more? Then you can start looking at, okay, well, what's the next step up? Can you push yourself to go more and more? Competition on that level, I think, is actually a really good thing, and it helps keep everything at a high level for everyone, not just in the local school, the district, the state, the region. Overall, it helps to keep things really moving at a very legitimate level.
How do you find work-life balance as a band director? Now, you wrote a method book, so...
Let me preface this that obviously I must be singled that I wrote a method book and spent thousands of hours, across the street at my local 85-degree bakery using their Wi-Fi and air conditioning. But it's very important. I think someone that is only 100% band, 100% music, and living the life, you're going to break down. There's no way of doing it. You have to have outside hobbies. For me, I started really young. I'm a big fanboy of wrestling. So for me, going out watching wrestling is a huge thing, and going out and exploring and finding more stuff, which more and more I'm finding wrestling to have parallels to band, to music. The older wrestling stuff from the 80s was more like jazz. They knew what the stuff before, or what was going to happen at the beginning. They knew the ending, but the middle part, that was like a solo in a jazz. That's freedom to just interact with the crowd and get the crowd to really enjoy and be bought into what you're doing. And it's similar to jazz. Nowadays, things are a little bit more choreographed throughout the entire wrestling match. So now it's more like a classical piece of music where they have to hit their marks and be able to move together and make a choreographed fight look real and get you to buy into it. And when it's done right, it's just as exhilarating as performing a great piece of music as a fan. Other things I do is I play poker, which it's kind of funny because it ties into music, because one of my friends, great friends, is a poker player, but he's also a bassist in the Pacific Symphony. And so a lot of times we're playing together with all these musicians and we're talking shop about music. And so it becomes a nice way of relaxing about music without thinking about it and letting it weigh on you in any way, shape, or form.
All right, Matthew, what are the challenges facing music education or band, and how can we best meet them?
I think the hardest thing that we're finding now is, in California, the biggest crisis that's going to hit us is the declining enrollment situation that's going on, because the cost of living is so high and people are moving out of state. And so you have people higher up that are looking for any solution that might mitigate that problem. And so what we're having in my district is where we have all these little middle schools. We have 10 middle schools. None of them are really more than 370, maybe 800, or maybe 400 tops at one school, but most of them are very, very small. And so they're getting smaller and smaller. We have one elective period, and they keep adding more and more electives. So at a school like mine, that's 7/8, we have a bunch of kids that, for the last couple of years, we had a bunch of kids choose an elective that seemed really fun. Well, then the next year they saw how much fun the band kids were doing and that they're going on trips and they wanted to do band. So now I had a lot of beginners that were 8th grade. And reality is everything I've created, everything that you see on the webpage, it comes out of the necessity of the moment. Creativity was sparked by the necessity. Invention is sparked by necessity. And so for me, being able to get through book 1 really quickly by usually November is a necessity, because I need to try and get those 8th graders to move up to advanced band really quick. Now, is my level of advanced band going to be the same as everyone else? No, it's going to be lower, because every year for the last 2-3 years now, over 60% of my advanced band going into festival are beginners. We started in August, and most of the other schools, they've had kids that have been in the advanced band for 2 to 3 years. We have 2 schools in my district that are 7/8 middle school. And then we have 2 other schools that are 6, 7/8 middle school. And then the other rest of them, the other 6, are K through 8. So they can start band in 4th and 5th grade. And there's not many levels of band. It's usually just beginner and advanced. And so a lot of their kids can be in band from 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and be 3 or 4 year veterans of band, whereas my kids come into festival and they're 8-month veterans. But for us, the challenge for us is declining enrollment. But it's also, you're seeing, since Prop 13 in California, you're seeing declining enrollment in band programs. And certain districts are doing wonderful at it, others are not. And the key is to get ahead of it. And so what I've started to produce in our district was to try and get ahead of it. We started with first doing a middle school honor band. And the whole purpose of the middle school honor band was not to achieve excellence in music. It was to get large numbers of kids excited to continue on and go on to the high school. So we'll have 200 kids. It's more like an all district band than it is an honor band. But we'll have 200 kids. Well, that also means when they perform, there's going to be 400 to 600 parents as well. So it allows the 4 high school guys to come in with their boosters and themselves, and they can start targeting everyone. And the goal is to get all those kids to continue on. And if they can do that, then we know we're building the numbers at the high school. We then went ahead and said, okay, well, what else can we do so we can make sure that the kids want to go from beginning band to advanced band? Well, what if we did an event called the Solo Ensemble Festival? And I stole it straight from the Anaheim Union High School District, where their solo ensemble is not a certificated thing where we're playing high levels. What it is it's targeting the beginners. And so the beginners get to come in and play a couple pieces. And the judges are not specialty judges. The judges are the high school band directors. And so you get to meet and greet the high school band directors. And on top of that, they give you a little bit of a 5-minute clinic and show you how to get going. And the whole thing is to really get them excited about continuing on to advanced band so then they can get on to the high school bands. So then the next thing that we started was, okay, well, if we have some elementary bands, what are we doing for them to want to be excited to go on to the middle school? So we started an elementary honor band for the same reason, to try and get all these kids together from across the district. And the beauty of all these things is because they're highly attended, it's great for the district admin to see. And if you want to get district admin on your side, so later if things do arise, you can sit there and start saying, hey, all these events are going to start falling by the wayside. Do you want that to happen? No one wants to see a reduction of programs. That's a big thing. And so numbers have become a big thing for me as far as band program for the last, I would say, 3-4 years, to try and justify our existence and try and help bands, basically.
If you had a chance to talk to your 18-year-old self, the Matthew walking across the podium at your high school graduation, what would you tell him?
Relax. I think I took things way too seriously all the way through. And you just got to relax, enjoy the moment, not take so many things so seriously, have less ego, and just enjoy the ride. I think I find myself now, I'll stare up at the stars and well, the 3 stars we have down here in Southern California, but I'll stare up at them and just go, wow, I got 3 stars. I'll take a picture and send it to my friend in Alaska and say, I got 3 stars today. And he'll say, that's it?
All right, Matthew. So this is the question that stumps many of my guests, and that is, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would conduct, and why?
Oh, without a doubt, there's 2. Elsa's Procession. That is the one that sticks with me to this day. And in fact, when my band director in high school, he retired, that was one of the pieces he did. And it was fun being in the little alumni band and looking down the line at guys and just seeing some of the gestures he gave. And man, we knew exactly what to do and just give that powerful moment with the trombones and low brass after this nice ethereal beginning that just keeps building. And it tells a story, and you don't need to know the story, even though the story's in the name. The story is there. You can just close your eyes and see all of it happening in all of its majesty. That would be the one I'd love to. I dream of it from time to time, going, if I had a chance to do a high school band, yeah, that would be it. That would be the one. That would be my golden moment to try and get. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Well, I'm going to be doing with my friend Phil. We're going to be doing a session, or it'll be our second time doing the session over at the SES BOA conference in January, where we're going to be doing a session on tuba. And what we did 2 years ago is we're going to replicate it. We asked all of our friends to bring 30 tubas, more than that actually, and they're going to be tubas inside one room for everyone to use. And we're going to take all the band directors that show up and take them through how to teach tuba, but also how that also integrates to basically all brass instruments and even woodwind instruments, and get them understanding how everything works. And the beauty of it is 2 years ago, it was almost like a goof, but me and Phil frequent a certain establishment, but they were all band guys too, and they allowed us to use some of their back rooms to do mock sessions, and they were a part of it. We brought tubas over and they were enjoying it. And so we're hoping to get sponsored by Bottle Logic again for this session. But if you do show up, we're hoping to have gift cards for people that are able to pass our low tone challenge, where we're going to have people play pedal F. If you're a woodwind player and you've never played a tuba, if you can play a pedal F, you'll get a gift card, and you can even, pick our brains later on at Bottle Logic later on in the evening.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal area. Everything that's going on, everyone's really does want to help everyone else, and it's a good environment to be in right now.
Matthew, do you come to Midwest?
No, I've been. That's where I want to go. I've been wanting to do it for so long, and I think the cold really freaks me out.
Come on now.
It's weird. My mom's from Hawaii. I'm from Southern California. My dad's from Buffalo. Now, you would think I'd get some of this Buffalo type sort of cold weather environment, but I get cold when it's 50.
Have you ever been?
No.
Oh, man.
I think it's one of those that I think it'll happen sooner or later. I think within a year or two, I can see myself going to Midwest for sure.
It's a great time. I mean, Midwest and TMEA are really, really fun.
Yeah, both of those are definitely bucket lists. And I think when I say bucket list, that's not going to be 20 years down the line. That's going to be within the next 5 years for sure.
Yeah. No, Midwest is a special thing. All right. And so I'll plug your book as well, as we talked about it for most of the episode, so I'm sure people know about it. How can people get in touch with you?
If you're on Facebook, the easiest way is to just shoot me a message on Facebook. I believe my profile is still Matthew Provino, so just type it in, or you can find me on the forums. I tend to be a little active on the Band Directors Forum, the Middle School Band Directors Group, as well as the Beginning Band Engagement Chat Forum.
Excellent. Matthew, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.